A strange thing started happening in the global economy recently. The numbers that governments, banks, and investors rely on every single day suddenly stopped behaving the way they used to. Not the stock market numbers, not the inflation numbers, the deeper numbers, the ones that quietly control the cost of fuel, food, transportation, and almost everything people buy. For years, those numbers followed a predictable pattern. Supply moved here, demand moved there, prices adjusted, and the math worked. But when one critical variable changes, the entire system begins to shake. And right now, one variable has changed in a way that very few people fully understand. Let me explain. The first number you need to know is 20 million. That's the approximate number of barrels of oil that move through one narrow waterway every single day. 20 million barrels, that represents roughly 1/5 of the world's daily oil supply, moving through a single route. For decades, the global energy system has quietly depended on that flow, continuing without interruption. Tankers move, refineries receive crude, fuel stations stay stocked. The system works because the route stays open. But the moment that route becomes unstable, the math changes instantly. When traders even suspect that supply could be interrupted, prices react before anything else happens. Oil doesn't wait for confirmation. It reacts to risk. That's why energy markets can move faster than almost any other market in the world. When uncertainty rises, oil prices often jump first, and everything else follows. Transportation costs rise, shipping costs rise, manufacturing costs rise, and eventually those higher costs reach ordinary families. Not through a government announcement, not through a new law, but through everyday prices. Economists sometimes call this an energy ripple effect. When oil prices climb, the ripple spreads through the entire economy. Fuel becomes more expensive. Airlines spend more. Trucking companies pay more. Factories pay more for power and transportation. And those businesses pass the cost forward. Eventually, the ripple reaches the supermarket, the restaurant, the delivery fee, the heating bill. Most people never see the original cause. They only see the final price. And that's why energy prices are often described as an invisible tax. No letter arrives in the mail. No vote takes place in Parliament or Congress. The cost simply appears in daily life. A few extra dollars at the gas pump, a slightly higher grocery bill, a higher cost to ship products across oceans. Individually, those changes look small. But when they affect millions of households, the impact becomes enormous. Now consider another number that rarely gets attention. Global supply chains move an extraordinary amount of goods through air freight every single day. Electronics, medical equipment, high-value components. Air freight represents a smaller share of total cargo than ships, but it carries some of the most valuable and time-sensitive goods in the world. When disruptions hit transportation hubs or flight routes, shipping costs can rise quickly. And when shipping costs rise, while energy prices are also rising, something important happens. Inflation pressure returns, even when central banks believe they are finally bringing inflation under control. That's the problem policymakers worry about the most, because interest rates were already adjusted to fight previous inflation waves. Now they face a difficult choice: support economic growth by lowering rates, or keep rates higher to control new price pressures. Neither option is perfect. That's the difficult balancing act modern central banks face during global disruptions. But there is another number that almost nobody talks about, and it might surprise you. Some of the world's most advanced technologies rely on materials most people never think about. One example is helium, not the kind used in party balloons. Industrial helium plays a critical role in semiconductor manufacturing. It helps cool equipment and maintain ultra-clean environments required to build microchips. Microchips power nearly everything in the modern economy: phones, computers, electric vehicles, data centers, artificial intelligence systems. When supply chains for critical materials tighten, the effects may take months to appear, but when they do, they can influence entire industries. History shows that supply disruptions often unfold in stages. The first stage is visible immediately: energy prices, market volatility, currency movements. The second stage appears weeks later: shipping costs, manufacturing slowdowns, logistics delays. And the third stage is the slowest: hidden supply bottlenecks that quietly build pressure until industries begin to feel the strain. By the time the third stage becomes obvious, investors and companies that track the early signals are already adjusting their strategies. That doesn't mean panic is the correct response. In fact, experienced investors usually do the opposite. Instead of reacting emotionally, they ask one simple question: how long will the disruption last? If disruptions are short-lived, markets often recover quickly. If they last longer, businesses and economies begin to adapt in different ways. New supply routes appear. Alternative suppliers step in. Technology shifts. The global economy has a long history of adjusting to shocks, but those adjustments take time, and during that time, uncertainty can create both risk and opportunity. For individuals, the most practical step is often the simplest: protect purchasing power. Higher inflation slowly erodes the value of idle savings. Even modest interest on savings accounts, treasury bills, or other low-risk instruments can help offset that erosion. These are not exciting investments, but they can help protect financial stability during uncertain periods. The second step is preparation. Not prediction, preparation. Markets move quickly when fear spreads. Quality businesses can fall in price even when their long-term fundamentals remain strong. Investors who already know which companies they believe in are better prepared when opportunities appear. Because when volatility rises, decisions made calmly in advance become extremely valuable. The third step is perspective. Economic shocks have happened many times in history: oil crises, supply chain disruptions, financial crashes. Each one felt overwhelming in the moment. Yet over time, economies adapted and markets eventually recovered. Understanding the mechanics behind these disruptions helps replace confusion with clarity. Because when people understand the numbers behind global events, the world suddenly starts making sense again. And in investing, clarity is often more valuable than prediction. The global economy hasn't stopped working, but when one key variable shifts, the equations change. The investors who understand those changing equations are usually the ones best prepared for whatever comes next.